Hello again, and welcome back to Phillies Extra, the baseball podcast from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm Scott Lauber, and I write about the Phillies and Major League Baseball. And whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or watching on Inquirer.com, the Inquirer's YouTube channel, Facebook, or X, I want to thank you, as always, for spending some time with us. You'll know my guest this week as the soundtrack of your summer. Scott Franzke joined the Phillies broadcast team in 2006 as the host of the pre- and post-game shows on the radio. A year later, he took over as the primary play-by-play announcer, and for 2 decades, he's been half of the immensely popular Franzke LA radio booth with Larry Anderson. His voice is synonymous with so many of the Phillies' greatest moments over the last 20 years, especially in October. Think back to Jimmy Rollins' walk-off double in Game 4 of the 2009 NLCS, and you can still hear, "It'll go up the alley. Bruntlett will score. Ruiz around third. He's being waved home. The Phillies have won the ball game." When Rhys Hoskins spiked his bat after homering in the 2022 playoffs in the first postseason game at Citizens Bank Park in 10 years, Franzke simply shouted, "Swung on, crushed." And of course, his most famous call came a week or so later when Bryce Harper homered to give the Phillies a lead in the 8th inning of their pennant-clinching victory over the Padres. "It is Bedlam at the bank," Franzke said, and who among us will forget it? Franzke is a 3-time winner of the Pennsylvania Sportscaster of the Year award and an all-around great guy. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. First, though, let's recap a busy week in the Phillies universe. On last week's show with my guest Cole Hamels, we covered Kyle Schwarber's return on a 5-year, $150 million contract, a deal that came as no surprise to anybody. If you didn't hear that episode, please go back and give it a listen. Since then, the Phillies have made 2 other additions. On Monday, they reached a 1-year, $10 million agreement with outfielder Adolis Garcia. The plan for Garcia is to take over in right field for Nick Castellanos, who's expected to be traded or released before spring training. And when the Garcia deal was finalized on Tuesday, Dave Dombrowski said the outfield is, quote, "pretty well set," unquote, and essentially declared that prospect Justin Crawford will come to camp as the prohibitive favorite to be the everyday center fielder, with Brandon Marsh as the strong side of a platoon in left. Then, on Wednesday, the Phillies reached a 2-year, $22 million agreement with reliever Brad Keller, who figures to slot in as the 7th or 8th inning setup man. Right now, the bullpen consists of closer Joan Duran, Keller, and Orion Kerkering from the right side, and Jose Alvarado, Matt Strahm, and Tanner Banks from the left. That leaves 2 vacancies. Dombrowski suggested the Phillies could take a look at some younger guys. There are certainly going to be some candidates who will get a look in camp. Also this week, the Angels signed Jordan Romano to a 1-year, $2 million contract. Romano was the Phillies' big bullpen addition last offseason and also their biggest bust. After signing for $8.5 million, he posted an 8.23 ERA and missed the last 6 weeks of the season with an injured finger. A 2-time All-Star with the Blue Jays earlier in his career, Romano will now get another chance to rebuild his value in Southern California. Oh, and the Washington Nationals are set to hire Phillies assistant GM Ani Colombi to be their general manager under new president of baseball operations Paul Taboni. Colombi joined the Phillies after the 2021 season and basically ran the data analytics and research arm of Dave Dombrowski's baseball operations department. At age 31, he'll be part of the Nationals youth movement in the management ranks. Taboni is 35, and new manager Blake Butera is 33, barely older than some of his players. Finally, Dombrowski said this week that catcher is, quote, "really our main focus," unquote. The Phillies' priority remains bringing back JT Realmuto. Dombrowski has said that he's optimistic something will get done, but it hasn't happened yet. I have some thoughts, and I'll share them along with more off-season talk later in the show. And if you stick with me, as always, we'll take a question from a listener at the end. Right now, though, I want to bring in our guest. So without further ado, here's my conversation with longtime Phillies radio play-by-play announcer, Scott Franzke. Scott Franzke, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure, Scott. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, too. We haven't seen each other since Game 4 of the division series at Dodger Stadium, which was more than 2 months ago now. And I know how I feel after the baseball season. I can't even imagine what it's like for you. Like, you talk for 2.5, 3 hours a night, every night, for 162 games over 180 something days, plus the playoffs. When it's all over, like, are you just like, hey, I don't really feel like saying anything to anybody except maybe my family for like the next few weeks? Like, are
Yeah,
you just sort of in a quiet room by yourself for a while?
it's really interesting because it's in some ways, honestly, it's kind of like a death in the family. I mean, you're so invested in it, and you're putting your entire life on hold because you don't know when it's going to end. I mean, there are certainly seasons when you're like, you've got it marked on the calendar, and you're headed for 95 losses or whatever the case is, and so you can check that box, and you know that whatever on October 1, you can do whatever you want. As we always say in the room, you can pick your own friends at that point. But this is different, I mean, you're hopeful for a long run. You never know how it's going to turn out, but you're hopeful that you're at it for a little while longer. And then for it to just come to such an abrupt end, it really is. It's like a car accident or something like that totally stuns you for a little while, and it takes a little time to sort of get into the groove of the off-season life and sort of move on past it.
Well, I appreciate you talking with us today. And so, like I said, it has been 2 months, and I want to really talk about what the Phillies have done so far in the offseason and kind of look ahead. But first, I'd like to tie a bow, if we could, on, because I think it was one of the toughest losses and most shocking endings that you or I have witnessed in 20 years of doing this. And, I know what it's like to sit there in the press box. Orion Kerkering's throw to the plate goes high and wide, and I've got to write the first few sentences of my story and file it as soon as possible. So I'm reacting kind of in real time, and I'm trying to convey what I just saw and maybe give it some perspective almost as it happened. And you're doing the same thing, except your reaction's even more immediate, right? Because the words are like literally spilling out of your mouth. And I re-listened to your call last night, and I thought that you sounded appropriately stunned by what had just happened. Kind of put me in your seat, if you could, at that moment, and sort of tell me what was going through your mind as you tried to kind of make sense of this in real time.
Yeah. I mean, I think number one, of course, our job is as a play-by-play person is just to say what you see. And like you said, react in real time. Obviously, you have to stay in some measure of control so that you can continue to describe what's going on, because there's a lot to get to, especially on radio. I mean, on TV, you could just let it play out. And I mean, obviously, from a home team perspective, there's anguish, there's being upset, but just from a baseball standpoint, like you said, it's not something you've really seen before. You've never there's no way to practice an ending like that. Everybody, when they start out in this business, they're so focused on things like their home run call and making that a good call. Whereas it's those games like that end like that you've never seen before, that you can't really prepare for. So it's really just a react in real time and say what you see kind of situation. It's funny. I probably listened back to it when it happened. I haven't since, so I haven't heard it in a while. But there's just so much to get to in terms of the emotion of it, obviously the finality of it, and then just you owe it to somebody who's in their car, driving on the Blue Route or something, to describe what's happened. And there's a lot to describe there, between where the runner was, the options that were available to Orion. There's, JT's posture. There's the base runner coming home. There's so many things to describe, and there's no way to do it all at the exact moment it's happening. So you have to kind of backtrack and sort of revisit some of that stuff. And so hopefully we kind of did that appropriately enough.
Easier or harder on a call like that than, let's say, Jimmy Rollins walking it off in the LCS in 09 in Game 4? Easier or harder to make that call, which is a winning call that ends a game, or the heartbreak of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they both they're kind of, it's all kind of the same. I mean, again, we're fans. We work for the Phillies. We know who we are broadcasting to, and we're broadcasting to Phillies fans. So we definitely describe things from a Phillies fan's perspective. And so I think whether it's in a winning situation or a losing situation, they're both they both present the same sort of challenge. I will say that obviously a play like the Rollins game ender, there are elements to that are more, let's say, ingrained in your toolkit as a play-by-play announcer. I mean, you've seen a double to the gap many, many times. So the basic mechanics of what's happening, you've seen before. You may not have seen it to walk off the game or walk off a series or have a dramatic playoff win, but you've basically seen the same mechanics before. So maybe that one's a touch easier just because you've quote unquote practiced it in a certain way. This other one, yeah, that was one I had not seen before.
Yeah, none of us had.
And I don't really hope to relive it.
No. I mean, just look from my perspective, right? That was a pretty brutal clubhouse to work that night. So
I'm sure
not a fun place to be. And, but hey, look, again, part of the experience of covering baseball, right? Just when you think you've seen everything, you see something you've never seen before. So I think there are two very different perspectives on the Phillies offseason so far. And for me, it probably comes down to where you live. Like locally, even though I think fans were overwhelmingly supportive of re-signing Kyle Schwarber, and I think they feel the same way about JT Realmuto, there's this sense of, they're just bringing back the band, right? Never mind that they've lost 8 of their last 10 playoff games going back to 2023. They're just running it back. And then nationally, like when I talk to the officials from other teams and, I'm at the winter meetings a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, wait a second. Why would you take a stick of dynamite to a roster that's won 90, 95, and 96 games over the last 3 years? Like, why would you blow that up? I'm kind of the opinion that all you can do is build a roster that's good enough to get into the playoffs every year and you take your chances. I wonder sort of where you stand on this push-pull of like keeping the band together versus really making changes.
Well, I mean, I think certainly it's a little more pragmatic to take the latter side of things when you say, look, let's build a team that can win 95 games. If we get to the playoffs, if that's good enough to get to the playoffs, then we'll take our chances. We'll roll the dice with the guys we got. There's a lot of value in that. And again, it's hard to win in the postseason. And I think we can all appreciate, the variances of what might happen in a 5-game series or a 7-game series. And we saw it throughout the playoffs these past couple of years, the fact that, things do change and teams get hot and fortunes can change in an instant. I mean, you look back on that series with the Dodgers and the series could have been very, very different based on 1 or 2 or 3 plays. Now, obviously, you can say, well, it'd be very different if they'd hit 9 home runs in a game, right? Clearly, obviously. But they were right there with LA. They're a team, the Phillies are a team that can compete with anybody in baseball. And it's not the worst thing in the world to run it back. I mean, they've also made some slight improvements, I think. The Keller signing this week has a chance to be a really big boost for their bullpen. Which obviously has been an issue in the postseason these past few years. And again, we'll see what they, everybody wants to point to the offense, and I get it. They did face the best pitching that the playoffs had to offer in the Dodgers. They didn't score a whole lot. Obviously, it was a short series. That's not to say they couldn't be super hot a year from now in October with the same guys. So I can understand both sides of the coin. But for me, I think you do everything you can to get there. And then you see what happens when you're there.
Yeah, for me, I keep going back to a conversation Kyle Schwarber and I had at the All-Star game this year. And he said to me, look, he's like, I've been lucky enough to go to the playoffs. Now it's 10 of 11 years. At the time, it was 9 out of 10. And he said, every single time, no matter what, whichever, whether it was the Cubs or his year with the Red Sox or with the Phillies, like he goes, every time we felt like we were going to win it all when the playoffs started, and we won it all once. with the Cubs in 2016. And I sort of think about that a lot. Like, yeah, it's really hard, and getting there is a huge part of it. And the more bites at the apple you can take,
sure,
the better off you are. So yeah, I mean, I think that and look, I wrote something the other day about, I think the way I phrased it was after the Garcia signing that they're remaking their outfield. And someone emailed me and sort of said, that's an interesting word you use, remake. It looks the same. And it's like, well, actually 2/3 of the outfield is going to be different next year. So,
right.
I know that Justin Crawford's been in the organization and it's a name people know, but he's new to this thing now. And so that's a change. And so it's not quite running it back. It's running back the core, but I don't know what people expected otherwise, given the way the core is set up.
Right. I mean, like you said, the outfield, 2/3 of it will be different. We don't know what the other side of the coin, as far as Marsh, if they platoon. Marsh had a really good year, minus April, minus that dreadful start. You take that out, his numbers look fantastic after that, albeit mostly against right-handed pitching. So they're going to need some sort of a right-handed complement that can mash left-handed pitching. Maybe it's internal, maybe it's the Wilsons or the Otto Kemps of the world that get that opportunity. I don't know. Something Larry said to me, has said to me in the past was, an athlete, like Kyle said, an athlete never goes into a game, especially ones of their caliber and a team of this caliber, goes into a game thinking this is their last game. Like we're going to lose and we're going to get bounced. They always think they're going to win the game, and they go into that with that mindset. And obviously, things can happen. So whether it's the start of a playoff series, whether it's the deciding game of a playoff series, they never go into it thinking, "Oh, we're beat. We're not going to win." They always think they have a chance to win. Larry said, we didn't. We were down in '93, and we still thought we were going to win. We didn't feel this impending doom. I think that's a fan's thing, but we can all appreciate why that is. We don't have any control over it. The players do. So they go into it thinking, I can control this. I can make this happen. But I'm with you. I'll take a shot anytime. The big thing, the really, really difficult thing is being good for 162 games, good enough to outlast the division and win the division and get into the postseason. And I get that Phillies fans are unsatisfied if they don't win it all. The players are unsatisfied if they don't win it all. And so, yeah, I'm of a mind that, good. Try to get there again and again and again and see what happens. But I don't know what, I know there's talk about, maybe you do make some moves on the infield. There's obviously now for a couple of years running a lot of chatter about Alec over at third base. They seem to work out some decent platoon ideas between Stott and Sosa, maybe at second base. I mean, that really, when you really break it down, what they did against lefties versus righties, that was pretty impressive. I mean, it adds up to a pretty good everyday player. So I don't know whether there's possible moves remaining out there that could come up to that end. But yeah, the outfield definitely is going to look different. Now, will Garcia be what he was last year? Will he be what he was in 23? That's a big difference. If he's 23, Adolis Garcia, then you've got a whole different look. But time will tell.
I was going to ask you what you thought of the Garcia signing, because look, as a hitter, there are a lot of the same characteristics as Nick Castellanos, especially over the last 2 seasons, a lot of swing and miss,
sure,
all of that. But look, let's face it, Castellanos isn't not coming back simply because he's been a declining offensive player. Like, there are other factors here, right? Between the incident in Miami in June and then losing his job, and then his criticisms of Rob Thompson back in September in Arizona. They're replacing him with another flawed hitter, but like in Garcia, I think they see someone who will, at minimum, play better defense in right field. And if they give him some help, maybe he can be closer to the hitter he was in 23. Is that sort of, I think you're making sort of the best out of out of a situation that isn't ideal, because Castellanos won't be here, but there'll be a $20 million pile of money in right field that is going to go to him. And this is not probably how they drew it up, but it's kind of making the best of what they've got to do here.
Right. I mean, you could run it back. You could really run it back and say, okay, Nick's got right field again, and we'll just play out the extra $20 million. But they're opting to go in a different direction. They are trying to make a change to go in a different direction. And like you said, at the very minimum, he'll be a better defensive player. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just fact of the matter. I mean, he's just a better defensive player. You can't pay $30 million at every position. Ostensibly, they are paying $30 million for right field.
Yep.
If they're on the hook for 20 for Nick and 10 for Garcia, ostensibly they are paying $30 million for right field. So it's like another $30 million. But again, they had to try something, because clearly that wasn't working. And I think there was some growing frustration that in trying to help Nick and do things like reduce chase and rediscover his swing, and it wasn't working. So and yes, there are a lot of other factors at play, and the personality and the things you mentioned with Miami and his comments on the manager and things of that nature. They're trying to do something different. So we'll see how it works.
It's funny. I see so many of the people who were clamoring for Justin Crawford to get called up last summer are now saying that they're concerned about the Phillies turning over center field to a 22-year-old rookie. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of excited by this possibility. Like, I guess I should say likelihood, because he's going to probably be the everyday center fielder starting on opening day. And I wrote about this the other day. The Phillies have had the fewest major league debuts of any team over the last 3 years. Crawford, Andrew Painter, and who knows, maybe even Aiden Miller later in the season. I think any of them, again, can bring kind of an energy that might be good for the rest of the group. I think people generally are excited about young players. I think maybe when they see Crawford in spring training, they'll feel that way. But I do kind of think it's funny that everyone wanted him up here last year, and now that they're ready to turn the keys over to center field, it's like, whoa, what are we doing here? We're putting too much on his plate.
Well, I do think there's a certain amount in the fan base that people really connected and latched on to Harrison Bader. And I think a lot of fans went into the offseason thinking, wow, we need to re-sign Bader. But, again, you can't pay that kind of money at every single position. At some point, you have to give your young players a chance, and it's the only way to handle costs in this game right now, is to give some opportunities to some young players. I mean, and the Phillies are obviously one of the biggest spending teams in baseball, but everybody has got to have limits. The only one that doesn't seem to have any, we all know, are the Dodgers, right? But everybody else has some sort of limit that they have to work under. So I think part of that is the fact that people were so in love with Bader for good reason. He was a good guy, good player, produced, played exceptional defense, seemed to be a great guy in the clubhouse, was affable with the media and his teammates and everything, as you know. So I think people really, that resonated with a lot of people. So maybe there's some fear of the unknown versus what was known. It's sort of like if it was, Crawford versus Rojas, right? Their choice was Crawford. If it was Crawford versus Bader, their choice was Bader. And so maybe they're feeling some of that, disappointment in that. I don't know. But I think it's an interesting email that you get and a perspective that a fan would have for you.
I think it might be different if they had followed Harrison Bader's career closely prior to last August, right? Because, you're talking about a guy who's been a good major league player, but certainly I think the Phillies got the two best months of his career in the best year of his career. And I don't know if you want to buy high on Harrison Bader in free agency. Someone's going to give him a 3-year deal, and I would just as soon let someone else do that rather than the Phillies, because I think, you probably get some regression to the mean there. So in the introduction, I mentioned some of your signature calls over the years, from Matt Stairs' homer in 2008 to Rollins in the walk-off double, the Roy Halladay's perfect game in the playoff no-hitter, Rhys Hoskins' bat spike, and of course, Bedlam at the bank. I'll ask you the question that I'm sure you get asked all the time. Do you have a favorite? Maybe is there a call that is not a playoff game or a classic moment that sticks out to you and you say, boy, that was really, or are you kind of like, hey, look, they're all like children, right? In a way, like it's hard to pick one over another.
Yeah, I mean, I generally can find some kind of flaw with all of it, but that's just me. When I hear that, someone like yourself mention all those, I just, the only thing I really think about is just how lucky I've been to be in it and to be doing it this long and to be doing it in a place like this where we've had some of those moments. I mean, those moments are created by the players. Those are the players making those moments. I'm just sort of the fool in the chair who got the good fortune to sit around and watch it. I've said this before, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying at the start of the conversation in the way the season ended and that call happened. Eric Bruntlett's unassisted triple play to end the game. Again, not a call that you ever get to practice. And that's like truly a once in a lifetime you're going to see that sort of play to end a game. I mean, I had never even seen an unassisted triple play, period. But then to have one end a game, I had definitely never seen that. And I had a triple play call. We were in Cincinnati somewhere early in my career, and I just didn't do it well. I had never seen one. I did, hundreds of minor league games, and believe it or not, I had never seen a triple play.
Yeah.
So I messed that one up. I think it was 06 or 07. It was early on. And then to have the Bruntlet one, I was just proud of the fact that I got all three outs and I got them in the order that they happened. That was my only thing about that call that I'm proud of. It was probably dumb luck, to be honest with you, but the fact that I was able to do that, I was from a play-by-play standpoint, that feels pretty good to me.
Yeah, I remember both of those triple plays, covering them both. And you're like, God, because you and I think, had a similar background in terms of coming up in the minor leagues. You were, in King County for 3-4 years. And
Right.
I was in Binghamton, New York, and great apprenticeship, right, on how to do this job. And yet, there was so much that you just didn't see and didn't know until it happened. It's funny, as much as I like so many of your calls over the years, like as a writer, one of the things I really like are some of the 2-minute opens to some of the bigger, broadcasts of some of the bigger games. I remember listening to the preamble before game one of the wild card series in St. Louis in 2022 and thinking like there was some baseball poetry there. I wonder how long you spend on those when they do come up, because and it's not every game, it's big moments. How long do you spend on them, and how important is it to you to frame those moments in that way going into a broadcast like that, because they are not, a Tuesday night in June, that
Sure.
that they mean a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the first time I remember really doing that was the last game in 07. When it all came down to the one day. And I just felt like there should be something different, because it was different, right? I mean, it was that whole season coming down to one single game. Everything, either you're in or you're out, and obviously there was one other scenario where it could have forced a tie and been a playoff game the next day, whatever. But I think that was the first time I did it, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think sometimes it's like you said, it's not a Tuesday night in June. There is something different to it, and I also think that what I would normally do typically to open a game is, hey, we're here. It's Tuesday night. You do the typical scene set. It's Zach Wheeler versus Max Fried, and It's game, the rubber game of a 3-game series in August or whatever. Everybody knows all that come game one, right? We all know who's on the mound. We've sort of led up to this. We've dissected it. So I was just trying to do something a little bit different that I thought painted a picture to where we were in terms of, that crazy last road trip, getting into the postseason, and sort of the unknown of like, hey, maybe this is the start of something amazing. And turned out it was. It was quite a run in 22. Didn't necessarily see that coming, but yeah, I just felt like it deserved something different. And some days I'll spend more time than others. Some days it just sort of pops into my head. I know I think in there I stole a line from a Mount Joy song, and it may have actually come to me like a lot of times on the way to the ballpark. I'll just listen to music or whatever, and it may have actually popped into my head how that's true. I mean, I think the line in that one was "These dreams are more than paper things," and it sort of hit me that idea that hey, these two teams on paper, Cardinals have all the pedigree. At the time, they were the team that was in the October every single year, and the Phillies were kind of the upstart, and obviously they had some great players. But I think I sort of sometimes start with something like that and let it unfold from there.
And you hit it. I mean, end of the era, really, it turned out for one team and the start of something for another. That series, and of course, who knows how it all turns out if the ninth inning of game one goes the other way and Ryan Helsley closes it out. But certainly that's how it turned out anyway. Okay, let's wrap it up on this because we're already well over the time that I asked you for here. And I feel bad shoehorning this into the very end because we could talk for 30 minutes just on this alone. But the Hall of Fame ballot is sitting on my desk. I need to fill it out here and mail it back within the next couple of weeks. But before I do, I try to get perspective from people in the sport, right? Players, managers, executives, and especially broadcasters, because everyone sees the game from a different perspective sometimes than we do as writers. And there are three prominent former Phillies names on this list this year. Again, Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins, and for the first time, Cole Hamels, who's making his debut on the ballot. And I've been an Utley voter the last 2 years. I go back and forth on Jimmy every year. Haven't quite gotten to the point yet where I've given him the check mark. But you covered, you've been there for all of their careers. You were there for all of their careers. I was there for most of them before I left and came back. I mean, really, I wonder where you begin on the three of them and what you think they're because what we're asked to do is whittle down like the top 3% all time to the top 1% all time. Where do you feel like they sort of fall in that realm?
Yeah, it's a really tough debate. It's not, I'll be honest with you, it's not something that I spend a lot of time analyzing. I feel like Jimmy and Chase deserve to get some votes. I think that, Utley's candidacy, I think, sort of stems from about a 5-year run of like sheer dominance at the position. And, you have to take everything into account, and injuries, cost him portions of his career. And certainly I think helped sort of hasten his, his declining offense and things of that nature. But I think as you compare him to, it's always a tough comparison because you're talking about the best of the best.
Yeah.
But you can't just say, oh, well, how do his numbers compare to Rogers Hornsby or, somebody who played in a completely different era. And I think for my money, there's no question that Jimmy and Chase, for a time in their career, were the best that the sport had to offer at their positions. I mean, Jimmy, from an all-around standpoint, the thing about shortstop is, people will say, well, there's just counting stats, right? For Jimmy, he played a long time. There's immense value in that. you know? Um, the that's to me, that's part of it. Being able to play that well for that long makes you one of the top 1% that has ever played the game. Quite
Yeah.
frankly, I mean that I just being around them every day, and you know this, you know what these guys go through in terms of wear and tear and how hard this sport is to, Charlie Manuel used to say it every day. It is really, really difficult to be an everyday Major League Baseball player. And there may not be many things more challenging in sport in terms of what it does to your body and being able to do it year after year, night after night, never taking a break, playing 159 or 160 or 161 games a year. So I think there's immense value in that. Again, I wouldn't have any issues checking the box next to Jimmy or Chase for myself. I don't know. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I haven't dug that deep into Hamels. I know what he was like for us. I didn't, I don't, I haven't analyzed the numbers for him post Phillies necessarily. So probably out of school for me to speak on his candidacy, where he ranks among the best pitchers of his era. But I know I wouldn't have any problem checking Jimmy or Chase.
Yeah, I think with Jimmy and Chase, a lot of it comes down to what do you value? Do you value a super high peak, even if it was short? Or do you value, like you said, 17, 18 years of consistent performance with a peak that was a little flatter, but it was nevertheless, there was more longevity there. And I don't know. I think I've sort of, as I look back on how I voted, I think I have trended more toward the higher peak player than the flatter peak, greater longevity. But I see it both ways, and it's really hard because, like I said, it's like, narrowing down the greatest 3% of guys of all time to the greatest 1%. And sometimes I think I heard someone say recently, what makes the Hall of Fame so great are the people who are like on the 1 yard line and can't get in. Like that's what makes it a special place. And sometimes maybe we don't celebrate the ballot as much as we should. We just sort of look at how the vote went down and all of that. So anyway, we could do a whole
probably so. Yeah. So I'm really actually very glad that I don't have to, because I would take it, and I know you guys all do. I mean, you and your colleagues with the baseball writers, it's like a real sort of honor to be able to sort of pick that and to be a part of that voting process. So I appreciate that so many guys are so conscientious about digging deep into the numbers to try to make sure that they're getting the best of the best. Because I don't think any, even the players who are just on the outside looking in, I don't think they want the standards necessarily lowered just so they can, I think players by and large want it to be a high standard because that makes it mean all that much more if you do get there.
Well, listen, Scott, you and I usually don't get to talk baseball when there's snow on the ground in December. So this was really a lot of fun. I appreciate you giving us more time than I even asked you for. And
that's my pleasure.
Happy holidays to you and your family. I know we'll be in Clearwater here before we know it. So please enjoy the time you've got. And thanks again for making some time for us here on Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
My pleasure, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Scott Franzke again for joining me. It's time now to open the reporter's notebook, and I have 3 thoughts on some news of the week. First, I mentioned in our opening segment that Dave Dombrowski said the Phillies are still working on reaching an agreement with JT Realmuto. MLB.com is reporting that the Phillies have an offer on the table, but Dombrowski said they probably aren't any closer to a deal than they were when they left the winter meetings on December 10th. A few weeks ago, I wrote that 35-year-old catcher Salvador Perez's 2-year, $25 million extension with the Royals may represent the floor for Realmuto, who will be 35 in March, and that a third year could be what ends up bringing him back to the Phillies. Given the possibility of a work stoppage in 2027, the second year of any 2-year contract that gets signed this winter is hardly guaranteed. So you could understand why Realmuto might be holding out for a third year. But I wonder, As we get closer to the holidays and the new year, and Realmuto remains unsigned, if a third-year option is the best offer that he's gotten so far, be it from the Phillies or anybody else, it bears watching, because if Realmuto comes back, you can pretty much pack the roster for Clearwater. But if he leaves, the Phillies will have to pivot to find his replacement behind the plate, which probably will involve a trade. In that scenario, they might have to consider trading Alec Bohm or Matt Strahm or somebody else off the big league roster to acquire a catcher, because it seems unlikely they would go into the season with Rafael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs as the catching tandem. Number 2, I'm not sure I understand some of the trepidation from fans and media about the Phillies giving Justin Crawford a chance to be the everyday center fielder. I realize he's young. He'll turn 22 in January. And assuming he makes the team out of camp, he would be the youngest position player in an opening day Phillies lineup since Scott Rowland in 1997. Hat tip to my friend and colleague Jim Salisbury for that note. But didn't we just spend most of the summer wondering why the Phillies weren't calling up Crawford? He was one of the youngest players in AAA, and he won the International League batting title with a .334 average. He's hit .300 and made consistent bat-to-ball contact at just about every level of the minor leagues. So what if he hits the ball on the ground? He has the speed to beat out a lot of those choppers, and it's not like he's going to be leading off. Trey Turner has that covered. Crawford is going to bat ninth, and if he brings energy to the bottom of the order, he'll be doing his job. Defensively, look, Dave Dombrowski has admitted that opinions vary, even within the organization, about whether Crawford is a better left fielder or center fielder. But everyone seems to think he can at least handle center field, and he'll have solid defenders on either side with Adolis Garcia in right field and Brandon Marsh in left, at least on most days. As I wrote last week, the Phillies had fewer major league debuts than any team in baseball over the last 3 years. They're overdue for an infusion of youth. Crawford and Andrew Painter on the pitching side can do that for them in 2026. Lastly, I know spring training is still a little less than 2 months away. I know the roster can still change, but it's never too early to begin contemplating potential batting orders, specifically what I believe is a real chance that Rob Thompson will flip Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. For most of last season, Schwarber batted second and Harper third, in large part because the Phillies didn't want to mess with Schwarber in the middle of a 56-homer season. That left Alec Bohm, JT Realmuto, and sometimes Nick Castellanos to bat behind Harper. Now, there were many reasons why Harper saw fewer pitches in the strike zone than any hitter in baseball. For one thing, opponents knew he would chase those non-strikes. Harper swung at 35.6% of pitches out of the zone, up from 33.4% in 2023 and 2024. Compare that to his MVP season in 21, when Harper's chase rate was only 24.8%. So yes, Harper could be more disciplined at the plate. But the Phillies could also help him out by protecting him with Schwarber. Even if pitchers don't suddenly pepper the strike zone against Harper, maybe his approach, at least, will be different knowing that he has Schwarber behind him. I could see an alignment where the Phillies have Trey Turner leading off, followed by Harper, Schwarber, and then maybe Bohm or Adolis Garcia. If Thompson wants to alternate righties and lefties through the middle and bottom of the order, he could go with Brandon Marsh in the number 5 spot, then either Bohm or Garcia in the 6 hole, followed by Bryson Stott, JT Realmuto, assuming he's back, and then Justin Crawford at the bottom. But no matter the order, the Phillies' biggest dilemma and their top priority will be how to get Harper to see more pitches in the zone and more fastballs in general. He saw almost as many breaking pitches, curveballs, and sliders as he did fastballs last season. Maybe that would change with Schwarber batting behind him. I think Rob Thompson is open to finding out. Okay, it's time to play Hit and Run, where we take a question from you out there. Want to join the conversation? Drop me an email at slauber@inquirer.com or reach out on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or you can always drop a line in the comments section on YouTube as well. This week's question comes from @Mr. Underhill on Blue Sky, who asks, quote, is it more likely that Aiden Miller plays third, assuming Alec Bohm is traded, or to be traded himself? Thanks to Mr. Underhill for the question. Love the handle, by the way. Any reference to Fletch is a great reference for me. I don't see either of those things happening. First of all, the Phillies aren't looking to trade Miller. I wouldn't say he's untouchable, but he's pretty close. The Phillies are aware that the core of this roster is aging. at the risk of showing my age, the Phillies have more 30-somethings than the cast of 30-something. And I think Dave Dombrowski knows that the way to achieve sustainability is to incorporate Miller, Andrew Painter, Justin Crawford, and other young players over the next few years. So unless they get overwhelmed with an offer for a star player, Miller isn't going anywhere. Now, they've been open to trading Alec Bohm since last winter, but haven't matched up on any deals. If I had to guess, Bohm will probably still be the third baseman on opening day. But if they did move him, well, Miller has never played third base. He's going to start to do so in spring training. But I think he needs to get some game reps at third in AAA before they deem him ready to do it in the majors. If Bohm were to be traded, to me, there's a better chance that Otto Kemp and maybe Edmundo Sosa would hold down third base for a few months while Miller gets better acquainted with the position. Long term, yes, Miller could be the answer at third, just not yet. Thanks again for the question, and we'll leave it there for this week and tell you that most episodes of Phillies Extra are available by going to Inquirer Live, the Inquirer Live page on Inquirer.com. That's an easy way to catch up on any shows that you missed. You can also listen to this episode and most others on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, please give us a follow and rate and review us. Quick programming note, next week will be our final episode of 2025, and we have something special planned. So don't miss that. Keep an eye out for it in all your feeds and on Inquirer.com. Thanks again, of course, to my guest, Scott Franzke. And thanks, as always, to our producer, Mariam Akraz, for helping put everything together. Most of all, though, thanks to you out there for listening, watching, and, of course, for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer. Have a great week, everybody, and happy holidays.